you as a leader, right? There's actually millions of people that follow you, right? That listen to you, that respect what you say, and they truly follow your lead. I mean, clearly they follow your lead. We saw this with the launch of, or the release, what's it called when a book comes out? When my book came out.
The release. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You had kind of predicted everything that was going to happen to a T of like, yeah, when we talk about this book, it's going to, people going by it. That's good. And so people clearly follow you and listen to what you say as a leader. And I don't know if you foresee yourself that way, but you are a leader. 2 questions. 1, where do you think you fall short? And 2, and more important, where are you trying to lead people?
Yeah, these are good. So I haven't thought of myself as a leader, but I think that 2 terms sometimes get used interchangeably, and I view them as very different. So as a leader, if I'm looking through that lens at myself, I think I'm very good at affecting national conversations and steering the attention of groups to one thing for sustained periods of time. I think I'm very good at that and helping people to prioritize. If I were to view myself as a manager, I think I have many deficiencies. And one of them would be, and this has been a help and a hindrance, as many things are, impatience. I have extremely high standards and hold myself to just a ridiculous degree of expectation for perfection, which of course leads to a lot of the problems we've talked about earlier. But on the flip side, I get a lot done, in part, I think, because that is a driver. That can also damage relationships very quickly, and it can, in a management environment, cause hurt feelings, and people do not put forth their best because they feel like they are being criticized and not lauded for their successes. And in part, that is because as an athlete, I really, and hopefully this doesn't sound weird. I don't really care if it sounds weird, actually. In sports and in business, my general feeling was, and I remember a mentor early on said something like this to me. He said, don't tell me about the good stuff. The good stuff takes care of itself. Just tell me about the bad stuff. And that's always been my personal policy for myself. But that does not always translate well to team environments. So that I think is my homework that and deficit that I've been working hard to correct for the last few years, is getting better at managing people who do not necessarily conform to that mindset at all times, which I think can be a big problem when it's out of control. But that would be the biggest deficit. But if we're defining leader as someone who can put forth a vision or an objective or catalyze a movement and move attention in people in one direction, I feel like I'm quite good at mitigating the risk of that. Because, for instance, people think that the haters, this is a very popular word on the internet, and not all critics are haters, of course. Important to be able to take criticism and feedback, but many people are thrust into a position where they have the opportunity to lead people virtually on the internet, which is a huge responsibility, and I take it extremely seriously. Worry about, say, their detractors causing problems. It's not the detractors, in my experience, that can do the most damage. It's the die-hard fans who get the message wrong, who get the directive and misinterpret it. That is where you have to do damage control and think ahead. So I think I'm quite good at that. As far as where I'm leading people, if I'm leading them anywhere, I've always, I shouldn't say always, but for the last at least 5 years, thought of my goal as creating a benevolent army of super learners, effectively, who can teach in turn 10 additional people each the same skill set. So to propagate a toolkit that enables people to be elite problem solvers instead of accidental, haphazard problem creators has been my goal for at least the last 5 years explicitly.
Teaching people how to learn so they can teach people how to learn.
That's right. And part of learning is problem solving. So you're by definition getting people who are good at dissecting problems, testing assumptions. That's where I'm leading people.
Yeah, that's solid. I mean, that's obviously a really positive thing. I always talk about the fact that, I want to help people learn how to learn. I talk about that all the time, and I've said that before on the podcast. We'll teach people how to, not what to think, but how to think. And obviously, I'm not the same scale that you are in terms of volume of masses of people, but there's definitely some people out there that I think are following me in some way, and that might be a strong word, but I always think that what I'm trying to get people to do, if you're following me, I'm really trying to get you to follow yourself and lead yourself. I don't, lead yourself. Okay, you see it, my path? That's cool. My path was good. I like my path. Now, forge your path. Figure out where you want to go, how you're going to get stronger, how you're going to get faster, how you're going to get smarter, how you're going to get better. And I always think that those answers work best when they don't come from somebody else, but when they come from yourself.
Absolutely. And I think also the teaching people how to learn, enabling my audience to learn how to learn. And when I say that, I mean 10, 100 times faster than would be expected in a lot of domains. That's only one leg of the stool. So let's say there are 3 legs. The other 2 would be teaching them to dissect and manage fear. And then the third leg would be teaching them to be emotionally aware and resilient. And that, I think, is covered largely by Stoicism. If you take it as a practice and not as something to passively ingest.
Yeah. And I just talked about Stoicism on my last podcast because somebody hit me up on Twitter and says, do you practice Stoicism? And I was like, no. I just said no because I'm pretty terse on Twitter. and the guy kind of wrote back. I don't want to say he was offended, and I don't want to rehash the whole story because I just talked about it on my last podcast. But he said, hey, what's wrong with Stoicism? And I wrote back. I'm like, man, there's nothing wrong with Stoicism. I get it. But for me to say that I practice it or even that I learned it from studying the ancients is not true. I didn't go to Princeton. I didn't study. When I was in high school, I wasn't an overachiever. I was an underachiever. I was a troublemaker. So I didn't learn anything about Stoicism until much later in my life. My beliefs aren't founded on what I read. They're founded on what I lived. And it's just, does it make sense? Yeah. When I look at it now, and people have always asked me, are you going to do Marcus Aurelius I'm going to do Marcus Aurelius on the podcast. And really all I'll be saying is like, look, Marcus Aurelius said this thousands of years before I did. Awesome. But I would love to be all educated, but I wasn't. I went down the path that I went down and experienced the things that I experienced in my life. And I came to the same conclusions that these ancients came to. So it's an interesting dynamic.
No, it is. And I think it's worth noting also that if you find anyone who is consistently good at operating at a high level in stressful environments, the tools are the same.
Exactly.
I mean, if you read one of my favorite books, Musashi, historical fiction, fantastic book, it's all the same shit. You read that. Stoicism and Seneca was my real introduction, but that didn't come into my life until 2004. So it was after graduation.
For those of you that want me to do Musashi on this podcast, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do Musashi, and I'll tell you why. And if you've read it, you can't. You got to go through Musashi to get to the end. Yeah. You got to go through the whole thing to get to the end. It is one of the best rewards in all of literature to get to the end. And the end, this is how many pages is Musashi?
It's 900 something pages.
It's massive book. And And you have to read the whole thing. And it's all good. But it all comes, and it's literally, I think in my copy, because I always laugh about this, it is 2 or 3 pages from the end of the whole book. It's where you get to the end of Musashi, where you go, damn, that just happened. Yes.
The payoff is so
good.
good.
The payoff is so good. And I'm not going to do it on here because obviously I'd have to give away the payoff. Yeah. And so I'm not going to do that. And you have to go and read Musashi. It's awesome. And the ending is just as good as it gets. It's as good as it gets. And it's historical fiction, but that happened. That's documented.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't get any better. So read Musashi for yourself, people. Maybe I'll give a 1-year lead time, and then I'll do it. 1 year. Episode 100. Maybe we'll give people enough heads up. Episode 100, we'll go back and do Musashi. And I'll give a spoiler alert at the beginning. Because Musashi's good when you get to the end. You go, God, yeah.
Is that kind of like The Matrix?
What's that?
The movie?
Is there like a spoiler at the end of The Matrix? Does it?
Kind of, I guess.
I don't know, man. I got to watch more movies, apparently. More Echo Charles movies.
Highly recommend Babe. Involves a pig. I think you'd like it, Jocko.
Didn't you watch that a bunch of times or something? You got some Babe story, right?
So, yeah, I do. So I tend to, when I write books so that I don't feel isolated, I write late at night. That's when I do my synthesis. So I can do research and interviews and so on. I'll do my writing generally between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. And so that I don't feel like I'm sitting in a cave by myself, I will generally listen to the same track or same album over and over again for a given book. That's how I focus. And then I will have a movie playing on mute in the background so that I feel like there are other people in the room. Now, at one point, I was like, all right, I've seen The Bourne Identity 5,000 times. I don't want to see it anymore. I've seen, because that was for the first book, I've seen Shaun of the Dead, which is a comedy, 6,000 times. I don't want to watch that anymore because I'll just watch it on repeat. So I might watch a movie 5 times a night. Okay, let's go to Amazon Prime, and I pull it up, and the first movie that gets displayed is Babe, about a little pig and Farmer Hoggett. And I put it on, and I was like, oh, this is hilarious. This is all right. Well, I'll pick a real movie after this. And then I was like, good God, this is a fine film. And the Renegade Duck. Anyway, so yeah. Babe, I don't think you'd actually like it. I think you'd be disgusted with my recommendation. But
I don't watch enough. I don't watch a lot of movies.
I think you'd like Narcos, which is a miniseries.
I've heard of that
about
one.
Pablo Escobar.
Right. I think
Colombia.
I've heard about that one. I just then you're jumping into what, like 30 hours of content?
That is only you're looking at about 20.
Yes. Yeah,
then you're in the vortex.
You know what? I want to watch that? Like when I'm 78. I'll watch Narcos. Put that on my list.